Chapter 2, Age of Alpine Awe, Book 1 by Mike Culligan, copyright 2014. Although Bruno had 2 ponies to pull the sled, at times father and daughter would assist in pushing or guiding the sled if it got stuck in ruts or ice had cracked and refrozen. Bruno had every intention of making this trip to market a commercial success. Times, like the harsh season of winter up here, were very tough. Bruno's economic situation was far worse than even Wilhelmina could imagine. His cash flow barely covered the expense of running his herd of goats and cattle. He couldn't afford to pay for all the labour he needed to run his numerous business enterprises. Veltheim staff were paid after market trips. Staff were now growing ever increasingly nervous about their future. The Veltheim farmhouse and outbuildings needed serious repairs just to stay standing, never mind develop. No state handouts existed to help farming people in his situation. The Silver Federation had put paid to the right of a farming family to appeal to the royal family, the Albsteins, for some assistance. Farmers used to be considered to be important citizens in the old Albstein-led kingdom, but now they were viewed as obstructive and redundant families occupying prime real estate that was merely holding up the white-hot forges of progress. In similar circumstances, most local families would have chosen to sell up long before all their funds had gone. Forced emigration to the colonies or relocation to a town to take up factory work in the pay of an industrialist would have been the only options available to them. Not enduring alternatives, but ones which many thousands of rural Alpine families have been forced to take. For sons of such families, they had a choice of factory work or joining the military might of foreign empires. Empires needed armies to protect them and navies to ply the high seas. Young men had signed up in their thousands already. A whole new world of trade was opening up as travel by sea and rail was taking over. Domination of trade routes by certain European powers was driving change. Mass emigration of Silver Federation people to the New World was already in full swing. For Bruno and his family, there was really no time to lose. The biggest obstacle to solving the current Veltheim problem was currently Bruno himself. He had so far refused to confide in his wife or in his daughters about the dire economic situation of his farm. It was just as well that his 2 eldest daughters had already figured out the family demise. Monika and Sophia were desperately trying to find an economic solution to the imminent collapse of the Veltheim farm. Meanwhile, farming business had to go on. The Veltheim father and daughter duo continued their trip to market. "Keep the dog under cover," shouted Bruno to his daughter Monika. "This snow will go on for days now. We'll stop once we reach the Edelweiss Inn. You watch out for obstacles like fallen trees and hungry wolves, and I'll drive the horses on. Let's just get to the Edelweiss Inn today. We've got to keep our strength up." "You mean you've got to keep your beer and schnapps levels up," replied his daughter Monika. Moving off down the mountain on the narrow rutted road towards the market town of Bramstadt was not an easy journey, even in mild conditions. Setting off in a blizzard was not a wise decision, but Bruno needed cash flow. The markets in all villages ran to a strict timetable, with only certain stallholders allowed on allotted days. Traders who missed a market day were frowned on by the market authorities. With darkness soon to fall, father and daughter could only manage a few more hours of travel. If they kept on going without resting the horses, they risked being caught out in the cold and the open. Snow continued to fall heavily all around them. Valleys offered some shelter, but turning a corner could bring you face to face with a bitter wind carrying drifting snow. Overhanging trees were laden with the weight of the snow. They looked so beautiful, yet overladen boughs became deadly for those foolish enough to disturb the snow. Finally, after 5 hours on the road, they could see the inn sign, Edelweiss, a pretty enamelled picture of the Alpine flower moved with the winds on a rusty, dangling fixings like a gibbet-looking pole. "I'll see to the dog and the horses, father. I know the groom here. I want to see if I can sell some of our cheeses to the landlady. If I give her some samples tonight, she might try some morsels, and we could sell her some large blocks of cheese that could keep for the winter if stored correctly." "Fair enough, but don't let that groom put his hands on you. I want you married into rich farming stock, Monica. We don't need another groom at the farm. We need more capital or more investment," said Bruno in a strict voice. "Don't lecture me, father. Just go in, enjoy your food and drink, chat to the locals, sweet-talk the landlady with your magnetic charm, and drink her beers and schnapps, but let me deal with the business." "I'll see if I can sell the landlady some cheeses," said Monica. With that, father and daughter separated, and the horses and Aussteck, the faithful collie dog, and his sled, were led by Monica towards the groom, who was waiting just outside the stabling area at the side of the Edelweiss Inn. "Lovely to see you. I'm now officially the most eligible bachelor in the valley," said the handsome groom to Monica. "Too much information, Saul. We're just here on business, if you don't mind, but since you're talking gossip about yourself, what went wrong? I thought you'd married that cloth dyer's daughter. What was her name? Tamara or something?" "Oh, I did, but she left me for a rich merchant. He was foreign too. Came from Scandinavia. He took her back with him. He trades in iron ore, I believe. He's got his own foundry up there. She was charmed by him in the inn here. I caught her kissing him in the bar area. She ran away, and I heard he arranged for her to join him just before he left the Silver Federation. Oh, so now you want me to feel sorry for your soul. You chase after a pretty young maiden, you steal her heart away, and then you find that your young bride can't adapt to a mundane life of toil under a hard-as-nails landlady. Saul, you can't say you didn't have a chance with me at one time. I just can't waste my time anymore now on romantic dreams, so don't you dare waste mine. I've got merchandise to sell, and at least one of the Veltimes has to have a head for figures, so I guess it's me. So any talk of love and romance will have to wait for now. If you just help me to tie up the horses and give our dog a kennel, I'll be most grateful. I've got chain for the dog, and I brought him some bones to gnaw on, plus some cooked meats for him, but he still pines for me, so I'll have to pop to see him during the night. Don't try and kiss me, Saul. My dad'll kill me if he catches me alone with you. If you behave yourself tonight, and what you say about your runaway wife is true, then I'll write to you. Father's got plans for me. He thinks I can marry into another farming family. I hate to disappoint him, but I'm a business girl. I've got a head for figures, so I would just refuse to buckle under the yoke of a husband who forced me to turn back the clock and go back to farming how it used to be. I'd love to help you to run this inn, but my family farm comes first, so it's business before pleasure with us Veltimes, I'm afraid. Inside the Edelweiss Inn, Bruno was waiting for Monica. Until he could see her, he supped a stein of nutty-flavoured, strong and very bitter ale on offer. In the end, he ordered a large jug of the dark ale, with its creamy full head. Dinner was to be a fondue served in a candle-heated saucepan. The use of breadsticks and slices of cooked meat on wooden skewers enabled the diners to dip into the melted cheeses mixed to the right viscosity. Usually, the dish was served with wine, but Monica and her father both preferred the ales on offer. Ale and fondue cheese with breadsticks and salted meats went down well after a day spent fighting blizzards up here. Dessert was an apple strudel with lots of dried fruit and spices added to give it more bite. Lashings of an almond and chestnut sauce laden with brandy were poured over the strudel. Father and daughter both had some schnapps just to take the edge off the cold. Outside, snow drifted ever more heavily, threatening to create a whiteout. A pallid darkness descended on the inn. 2 hours ago, the winter sun had set. Now, the springtime thaw just looked like an age away. Winter, in all its majesty and savagery, was still holding an icy grip upon them. With supper served, Bruno fetched his old accordion. The accordion needed some reeds repairing, since they were sounding somewhat flat, a fact which instantly came to the attention of the drunken bar inhabitants, who were composed mostly of travelling salespeople. However, by singing, as well as playing some of the old Olstein Kingdom songs, which were simple waltz tunes for the most part, Bruno held his audience for a good half hour as he chose a half-dozen well-known traditional tunes to play. Luckily, he was boosted by an old stalwart who joined in on the inn's old piano, which was equally as out of tune as the accordion, but charming nonetheless. Just as he had tired of his musical repertoire, he found that the tuneful mood was taken up by a man on mandolin, who was joined by two girls on violins. The long Alpine winters encouraged people to take up skills such as singing and playing musical instruments. Bruno and Monica were exhausted by now. They said their good nights to the other travellers and regulars at the bar. It seemed sad to leave the others behind at the farm, but working life had to go on. Morning found Bruno and Monica up early to the strains of a cuckoo clock. Little bellows structures powered by a clock mechanism worked just like in the accordion. The bellows in the cuckoo clock forced air into reeds to make the sound. After eating some cooked meats and hot spiced drinks, plus muesli and bread for breakfast, it was time for father and daughter to head out. "We should be ready to set up our stall no later than 8 in the morning," Bruno said. "I've got to purchase some thread, needles and felt for our hand-sewn items. We also need yarns for our weaving looms. Food-wise, we're okay. We could get some cooked meats by bartering our cheeses if they won't sell. I do like the salamis and bratwursts on offer, plus the spiced and the herbal sausages are a delight at this market. Trouble is, there's so many folks selling cheese, you've got to be careful to not fall for the buyers. They try to haggle you down and take advantage of you. I'm always grateful to my creator for the fact that your grandmother, Tulipa, is never around to stir things up. If we can avoid hanging around at the end of the market when traders get a bit desperate and start giving away stuff, then I might be in with a chance." Monica hit back at her father straight away. "The only thing we can do is to try and make our price a bit more competitive than the other like-for-like rivals. We could offer a nice discount if the customer purchases more than, say, 3 of our big wheels of cheese. If that fails, then hide some of our stock if it will keep till next time, and don't let the punters see it. It's always trader desperation that they sniff out. Meantime, after you've taken your accordions for repair, I want to visit the refurbished Gothic church with a newly installed pipe organ, because there's a brilliant young organist called Klaus Inkelman. He's giving a performance on the new pipe organ. Oh, that'll have to wait till the market's finished. We can't afford tickets for that young man's performance," said Bruno angrily. "I've already thought of that," Monica interrupted. "The new pipe organ is so loud it can be heard outside. There's not an issue with that. I can simply join the throngs of other villagers who would stand outside in a blizzard just to hear Klaus play. He's so loved by the ladies. I can't believe he isn't married or even betrothed yet. In all of the Silver Federation there's not a man like him who's got such majesty over a pipe organ. The voicings on a good installation are like an orchestra. So ethereal, so majestic. I believe some have cried when they've heard him play. He releases the soul from its daily burdens. I so want to meet him, Father. I'd give anything for a private audience with him. Oh, such fatuous dreams of a farm girl. Here I was thinking you thought I was a good accordion player, and now you're planning to run off with a man you've never met just because he tinkles the ivories on a new contraption. Who would have dreamed the machine would enable such monstrously tall pipes to become full of air as a flute, but so intricately controlled by buttons and handles and foot pedals, with keyboards laid like some tiers of fancy white and licorice finger cakes? I'm just glad the monster's stuck in the church, not free to wander the streets, lest the very Alpine meadows would have to suffer its strains. I'm sure such a device would frighten my cows and goats, sour their milk, and ruin my precious breeding programme. Oh, calm down, Father. It's just an organ recital. Nothing can stand in the way of progress. Look what happened overseas when people tried to smash up the looms of factories which could make stockings and rugs for a fraction of the price of a home-based weaver," said Monica. "Oh, I'm not opposed to change, Monica. I just haven't got the means to change our family farm in the time we live in. I'm truly fearful of the pace of change, Monica. I feel that sudden change is like a rabid dog. It'll run up my path with foaming teeth and savage me." "I can't see the current changes as a force for good, Monica," said Bruno. Father and daughter parked up their sled in the allocated market trader stables. They chained up Aufstepp in a kennel alongside the stables where the horses were kept. They carried their market-ready items to a trolley for carting to the stalls, arriving just in time to set up. The area around the market had been shovelled clear of earlier snow, but it all seemed quite pointless now the blizzard was taking a grip. Still, people still got out and about in these market towns like Bramstedt in the mountains. Market officials collected rent from stallholders at some point in the day, giving them a chitty to prove they'd paid. Fees included the cost of employing town market cleaning up staff after the market and maintaining the marketplace. There was a considerable amount of work involved in keeping drains and paths spotless. A fair amount of rubbish was also created by the market stallholders, plus ancillary businesses around that also relied on the regular footfall of the market clientele. Stallholders were also given a secure lock-up area each. They were expected to provide their own padlocks, however, access to a cleaning up area, plus separate lavatories and washroom use and use of stables. Grooms had to be employed by the town to manage the stallholders' horses and ponies, plus dogs they often brought with them. Market stalls were laid out in a closely planned pattern by the market authorities in order to try and maximise profit and returns. Families supplying certain goods were expected to be regular attenders. Families stuck to agreed positions at the market. Signage was fairly permanent. Hawking was frowned upon in the market area, so there was some merit to being part of a retail conglomerate. Rents were very high, so it was only worth being a trader if you were part of an established group that could increase turnover to survive here in Braunstadt. Even in blizzard conditions, there was a healthy customer footfall. Food shopping was a necessary part of every family's day. People stuck to certain essentials if funds were tight. In good years, it was possible to make a decent living, but the Veltams wanted to diversify into fabrics and trinkets for pilgrims as food sales dropped. Traders were starting to see that out-of-town food, prepared and packed with new logos on it, was beginning to arrive in these small towns via small retail outlets. Sales of locally sourced honey, salted meat, and even cooked meats and cheeses were starting to be hit by these out-of-town imports. Non-food items were subject to hugely whimsical customer spending patterns, so it was worthwhile having a shot at doing them, because one never knew how the public might react. On one day that the storeholder would forget to bring a regular handcrafted item, such as a houndstooth loom knitted scarf, they would be told that someone wanted, on that one day only, they wanted 6 of them, but only if you could get them on that one day. Times for small town traders were certainly tough, as industrialisation took its toll on traditional trades. Already, American timepieces had begun to arrive in large quantities. They sold for a fraction of the cost of traditionally locally made handcrafted clocks. Food prices had to be competitive to match the ever-shrinking pockets, as those who were left behind on traditional farms and maintaining traditional labouring were becoming fewer in number. Urban dwellers who worked in the new factories had much less cash in their pockets to spend. Once, at their Veltheim family stall, however, Monika took prime position as a family face that most villagers did business with. Bruno was seen as a local, but they didn't take him as seriously as they used to, now that modernisation had swept many of his skills away. "I'll take 2 circles of your best cheese, but I want a free shawl for my wife thrown in," said a wizened old man to Monika, adding caustically, "I could get an extra half circle of cheese from your factory competitors for your prices." "Yes, and well you might, sir, but the other cheeses don't have our unique charm, nor do they match our unrivaled quality. The price is very reasonable. We don't barter on price. If you buy 3 cheese wheels, we might give you a small discount, but that's all, I'm afraid. It's up to you. We only have a small stock, it'll be sold soon, so I'd hurry up and buy while you can," replied Monika in a chirpy but rather testy tone. "I'll be back soon, child, with some cash for my first and final offer. Firstly, I think you ought to hear me out. For that, you need to come up close, because I'm going to whisper it to you. Come closer, child. Listen to what I have to say." With that, Monika walked to the end of the stall to meet the old man, bending over to hear him explain himself with not a little anger in her heart. The old man continued, "I have some friends who really like your cheeses, but someone's told me that your father is deeply in debt. I have a solution to your family's problems that might interest you. I'll be in touch soon. In fact, I'll visit your farm in the spring thaw. I do not wish to upset you, child, but your farming days on the Veltheim estate are numbered. So if I were you, I'd smile, give me the cheeses and shawl at the prices I've stated, or I'll argue with you, and your father will hear what I have to say in front of everyone in the whole market." Monika's face went white as a sheet. She could see her father joking to an old friend of his not 3 metres away as she held the fort at the stall. Part of her felt enraged by the old man's threats and his bullying. She wanted to slap him for his rudeness. But what if her father really was deeply in debt? just as the old man had said, and he was hanging by a thread with his creditors. Perhaps if sales picked up and people began to order more of the handmade crafts, then they could pay off their debts. Biting her bottom lip, though welling up with tears, Monica weighed up her options. The Veltons worked hard, they worked damned hard, but as she thought the old man was lying, it was still just one man to deal with. If she told her father about him, it could make things worse if the man's words were true. Bruno was giving nothing away about his debts, so Monica had been oblivious so far as to how badly her father was in debt. Perhaps, she thought, it was best to do as the old man bid. If she gave the family a chance to buy time, then things might not seem so bad in the spring thaw. After all, the old chap was just a shrunken old man with a limp, and he looked very physically weak. What harm could such a man do to her strapping, strong Alpine family? Why, they could knock him down with a shovel and claim he'd attacked the family, or make it look as if he'd fallen by accident on their property. Surely that would put an end to his nasty blackmailing threats. With these vengeful thoughts racing through her brain, she turned to the old man with a piercing look. "I think we can do business," she smiled at the old man. "With whom am I speaking?" "Ah, now that would be telling, young lady. I wouldn't want to upset you any more. Let's just say I'm a fortune hunter. I hunt fortunes in the same way that much kinder folk. They tell fortunes. I'm more genuine than a fortune teller, mind. I don't pander to what I think people may like to hear, or leave them dangling to find out more as soon as I've divested them of good coinage. No, rather, I've got novel solutions to seemingly insurmountable problems. I can turn a fallen and indebted family around. You see, a little cuckoo had told me that you'd recently had a new addition to your family. Just as I like a nice slice of marzipan top nut cake with hot vanilla and cinnamon sauce on top, and a stuffed pastry of dried fruits and cream, all washed down with hot coffee, I'd also like to find a means of paying for life's luxuries. I'll present your family with a business proposition. If you decline it, then I will become your worst enemy, because I'll demand a harsh settlement. Take your pick, young Alpine maiden. I could be your knight in shining armour if you let me, even if you think at my age it should have all rusted away." The creepy old gent continued. With anger inside her, Monica turned round to wrap up the two large tree circles, weighing many kilograms in total. She was about to select a basic shawl for the old man, but then he bade her to give him the most expensive one, which had taken 2 days of hard labour to make, because it was so intricately designed. Shaking with anger, she wrapped up the prettiest and most expensive handmade shawl on the family market stall into brown paper wrap and tied it up with string. "Now then, child, that wasn't so bad, was it? You see me as a viper under a rock. Yes, you'd be right, but you only saw me because the viper was disturbed from his hiding place by what your father's done. Your dad has stirred up a whole nest of vipers by not paying his debts. I'm the first of the poisonous snakes to show you some venomous fangs. However, if you let me settle this problem, then your family might be debt-free in as little as 20 years from now." With that, the old man took his goods in haste, then smiled at her. His gums showed in places where teeth were missing. She noticed an ugly scar across his right cheek. He also appeared to be missing 2 fingers on his left hand. "We'll meet again when the great melt starts, fair maiden. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. Good day." The rest of the market day passed in a blur of noise and bustle under heavy snowfall. Stalls had canopies on them to protect from the worst of winter storms. A chill wind blew snowflakes into people's faces. The shrill piped sound of a steam engine whistle gave away the presence of a traction engine as it pulled a line of heavy carts along, with yet more produce for sale. Close by this market there was also a farmer's livestock market. The sound of baying bulls could be heard carrying on the bitter wind off the Alps. Young bulls were sold for meat on certain market days. On a clear day, the snow-capped peaks could be seen clearly in the distance. Majestic, jagged rocks looking insurmountable by man or beast. Leviathan creations in the forges and foundries of mankind were building ever greater machines to thresh corn, to work flax, to grind cereals, and work a whole host of machine tools needed to manufacture the new goods of the future. Just like the sight of a whirring flywheel on a steam traction engine with its safety valve compensated device flying around some gyroscope, it was enough to remind people that mechanisation was here to stay. By coupling a steam-driven flywheel from a traction engine, an employer could drive threshing and milling operations. It was the sight of a machine doing what 12 men used to do that so mesmerised onlookers. Timber could be sawn by steam-driven saws. Yarn could be woven on steam-driven looms. Pumping engines using the power of steam compression and expansion, followed by a cycle of low-pressure condensation and vacuum, had already revolutionised hydraulics across a raft of mining and drainage applications and engineering. Besides the new age of power and creation, Monica could actually feel the power of the new technology in the engine vibrations at her feet. Harnessing such beasts, which replaced the sheer brawn of men, was now the future. How small enterprises could survive this leap of ingenuity was the real challenge to the Veltheim family. It was one thing to create new waterways to transport goods by barges towed by ponies, but once these machines took over, the new world that they would create seemed abhorrent to the Veltheims. Still smarting from her encounter with the snake man, Monica shuddered inside, an involuntary action which alerted her father, who was starting to pack away unsold items on the family stall. At least Bruno had cottoned on to the way of avoiding the great cheap sell-off at the end of the day. "Oh, good to see that we sold our best shawl. Remind me to check the takings, Monica. I sometimes think some of these locals are either short changers or slip in foreign currency notes, or mix in all sorts of tokens and piggy bank out of circulation coins to delight us. Darkness is an enemy to all cash transactions when money's tight. Oh dear, has somebody walked over your grave, Monica? You look pale and poorly, child." "Oh, I'll be fine, Dad. I need to be gone in an hour or so. Got to catch up at least half of Klaus's public pipe organ concert, mind. If you want to pop your accordion into the music shop for its re-repairs, then right now would be a good time to go. I'll hold the fort for you. You then grab a bite to eat. The Wiener Schnitzel smells beautifully cooked on the food aisle. They do a great deal on a sit-down meal with bratwurst, hearty cooked vegetables and jugs of ale to wash it all down. I'll pack up our stock and I'll load it up onto the cart. If you come back in the next hour or so with our horse and dog, we can hitch it on the sled and keep the doggy handy." "That's fine, my little pumpernickel. I'll pop off with my accordion for a pair, and then I'll retire for some ale and a bite of hot food at the eatery stall. I'll bring you back some food, or else you can eat later if you like." "Oh, don't worry about me, Father. I think it's just my emotions. I get a bit tearful, but I would appreciate it if you brought me back some nice spicy salami, cheese rolls, a fresh cooked loaf, plus a bottle or two of ale. I really do like the bottled beers up here they're brewing locally. See if you can find me one they call the Wurlitzer. Apparently it's so pleasant you can drink 5 bottles easily, then the world seems to whirl by in the pleasure of inebriation." "Oh, I'll see what I can do, my little piglet," said Bruno cheekily. "Don't be upset, Monica. We'll be fine, you know. Me, your mother, and now 3 girls to help at the farm. We'll manage, you know. It's going to be tough, child, but we'll get through all of this." "Oh, I hope so, Father, because the winter is so bitter this year. It's costing us a fortune in extra feed to keep the pigs, the goats and the cattle going. I worry about not being able to pay the wages of our workers. We're making piles of handcrafted items to sell. People are really starting to notice the quality of our work. If the markets were better organised, or if we could just set up something on our own and have customers coming out just for us, then we could be in a better position. Everyone tells us how beautiful our handmade goods are. We really deserve to have a much wider exposure for our goods, to start making a better return, to make a proper living. Perhaps it's time to take our handmade goods further afield and widen our horizons," replied Monica. "Oh, it's kind of you to take an interest in my financial affairs, Monica, but now's not the time to discuss it. I have some plans for us all, including our workers, but they'll wait. For now, just enjoy the moment. We did well today, and I can quickly calculate our takings. I want to see if we can improve our cheese production methods, plus try some new flavours to aim at the fondue market. Folks seem to like dining out al fresco around here. I reckon if we could team up with some wine producers from the lowland vineyards, we could do well in the new restaurants opening up in the large towns. I even got some ideas for the pilgrim market. We really do need to look into branding our products. Our cheeses are very high quality, but they need to be linked to something. The monks might be of interest. If we could hammer out a deal with them over using a link to their abbey and a church." We could help in financing their religious work and their buildings in return for branding support with a pilgrim's angle on it or an abbey logo or something. Times are challenging. We need any support we can muster up. The pilgrims who come up here, they're like mementos of the Alps. I think the religious icons and the copies of relics, which were big sellers, have been taken over by the factories now. Instead, we could make badges with felt pictures on them, or even badges that they could sew on their hats and rucksacks. We could even offer a "wait as we hand sew on your badge" service. We could branch out into fashion lines, so that decorating clothing with our creations as adornments or embellishments was a cheaper option for customers than actually buying expensive fashion in the first place. Your mother wants to sell our handmade hats, our socks, and our knapsacks with an Alpine picture on to pilgrims and other such tourists. The possibilities are endless, Monika. Smile, my pretty one. Just promise me you won't run off with that chancer groom from the Edelweiss Inn. He was unusually nice to me about my accordion playing. I know I'm not much of a player, and I stick to all the easy and the slow waltzes, where I can use the same type of bass button patterns on the bellows for draw notes and squeeze notes. But at my age, I'm not going to up my game and play fast polkas and jigs. I certainly don't envisage myself taking up button accordion to meet out some fancy sea shanty song. Father, I don't want you to spoil your homespun icon dreams, but there's something you and Mum should know, said Monika. The latest looms in the lowland towns are steam powered. They can produce endless copies of a design at a very competitive rate. I'm so glad you noticed the complete waste of time it is for us to make religious icons. The factories in the lowlands are now churning out vast quantities of tin, china, and even painted wooden trinkets for pilgrims. The railways are taking people all over Europe now, so to sell to people, you've got to be close to people. We can't reach all the hotels and bars and music halls to tout our wares. Our market stores are all we've got left, really. Mum and you are going to have to keep going, because you do not know what else to do. I've seen some of the factory-made trinkets for pilgrims and tourists as purchased by passers-by today. Factory owners are not interested in tradition, Father. They'll only plug into a tradition if it makes them a quick profit, or a steady profit failing that. They won't be using traditional methods to make icons, or mementos, or trinkets. They want to make large batches of products that will sell for a margin. Price is of a major consideration to them. If they see you selling a trinket, the first thought in their mind is how to undercut you. They're cashing in on the Alpine image. They're making shawls, scarves, holdalls, satchels, badges, sleeveless tunics with pretty snow scenes on. Now that we know what a snowflake looks like under a lens, they're even making snowflake designs on clothing accessories. They even have made some pictures of shire horses and peasants woven in on some of the garments. Everything is done by machine in a factory, by armies of workers who've given their souls to the machine-made age of mankind. As we've worked our socks off up here on Mount Rover, there's been a revolution in the workforce. Towns are full of workers on industrial looms. Workshops are full of people turning out cheap trinkets. Grime-belching mills, power looms of the lowlands are slowly killing us, Father. So we've got to adapt quickly, or die. Nonsense, Monika. Now you're really beginning to anger me now. I've told you to keep your nose out of the decision-making on our farm. I really have no interest in what they're doing in the faceless trinket and bottle-making factories, nor in the endless millworks now churning out stockings and mass-produced fancy goods. I don't care about them in the same way they don't care about me or you. Now keep an eye open on for things, and I'll be back in less than 2 hours with some Leberkuchen and a drink for you, so that you can at least catch the dying strains of that infernal pipe organ contraption in the new church. With that, Bruno disappeared into the swirling snowstorm. As Monika fought back yet more tears, she felt somewhat comforted, even if only by the bravado in her father's faith in their family's abilities. Perhaps there was a viable option for the Veltheims to be considered in fighting back against the behemoths of industry. The very forgers that could turn out girders for bridges, boiler pipes for steam engines, giant steel-frame constructions, including ships and powered canal boats, and delicate pressed parts like brass-wearing cogs and differentials, seemed to her like some melting pot for the creation of life itself. The traction engine driver wore copper-rimmed, closely fitting leather goggles and leather clothing held together by precisely engineered brass studs. He had a close-fitting, rounded, soft leather cap, and, for all intents and purposes, he looked as if he'd been created himself from the same huge crucibles brimming with molten metal, or the forges that sizzled with quenched steel and shuddered with giant heavy hammers that pressed still malleable hot metal to be fed into rollers for making the building blocks of a new industrial age. With darkness quickly descending, the number of customers was dropping off fast as well. Monika managed to sell most of the large wheels of cheese. She found herself having to make heavy discounts on some of the handmade loom work, however. She had inkle loom made straps and belts with fancy patterns on, but the public seemed nonplussed now that cheap factory copies were available. The effects of mass production could now be seen tangibly in her lack of sales. Customers appeared to be very picky about fabrics, with price being a serious issue. Despite this, sales were steady and appeared to pick up as time went on. Monika did her best to raise her spirits after the malevolent encounter with the old man. All appeared to be going well, except for the inevitable impending wrath from Bruno once he realised that his takings didn't match the so-called sales. Chapter 3.